The sea took our ship in its teeth and shook until Oak screamed. One moment I had both hands on a soaked halyard, boots skidding across a deck slick with rain and fish oil. The next, lightning showed me the whole world in white pieces. Ulfsten at the steering oar, beard whipped sideways. Astrid Ulfsdottir braced beside the mast with half a shield over her head. Hakon laughing because he laughed at anything that failed to kill him quickly. Sten's son, Leif, pale beneath a borrowed helmet too large for his skull. Then the mast split. The sail cracked like a giant's palm. The wave came over us higher than any hall roof I had ever seen, black at the belly and green along its torn crest, and our longship rose as if a god had hooked it from below. I remember shouting. I do not remember words. Men were ropes, shields, teeth, hands. The prow struck rock. The sound went through my bones and opened them. Planks burst upward. A rower vanished under the deck bench he had slept beneath for 19 nights. Ulfsten's steering oar snapped and threw him into the storm. Someone caught my belt. I caught nothing back. The sea punched the breath from me and filled my mouth with salt. I should have died there. Cold water takes strength, then thought. I kicked because I was 20 and angry, because my father had told me not to come home empty, and because my mother had hummed while sewing a charm into my sleeve. My sister had said I would look ridiculous as a rich man. The charm tore away in the water. Something hard struck my ribs. I grabbed it. A broken oar. The next wave flung me across teeth of stone, over them, through them, and down onto a beach made of black sand and crushed shells. I woke with my cheek frozen to the ground and a dead man chewing my boot. The beard, scar, and shoulders were Hakon's. His milk blue eyes were not. They held no humor, only patience. Seaweed tangled in his hair while his broken jaw worked at my boot. For 3 breaths I could not move. Rain drove across black sand. Shields rolled in the surf, bodies lay among broken planks, and our split stern rose beyond the reef. Hakon bit harder. Pain woke the rest of me. I drove my fish knife through his palm. He did not bleed. He did not cry out. He looked down at the blade as if I had offered him a question. Then he dragged himself higher up my leg. I yanked the knife free, rolled, and kicked him in the face. His head snapped aside. He came on. I snatched the broken oar and smashed it across his jaw. The bone cracked. His mouth hung crooked. He came on. Hakon, I said, because a fool's heart will try names before it accepts truth. All along the beach, drowned men began to stand. Kettle Broadback rose near the keel, still wearing his ringmail, axe dragging behind him through the wash. Old Bjorn shoved a dead hand through a heap of sailcloth. 2 rowers I had diced with the night before crawled over each other like dogs fighting for a bone. They moved slowly at first, knees wrong, necks loose, but every face turned toward me. The living warmth in me called to whatever cold thing had filled them. I ran. Call it cowardice if you like. Men who have not seen 6 corpses climb out of a winter tide enjoy large words. Courage is not standing in an open place because a song might sound better that way. Courage is choosing where to fight. The beach curved below dark cliffs. Above its western end stood a ruined shrine, 5 posts around a roofless ring reached by a narrow crack in the stone. I ran for that crack. Sand dragged at my boots. My left ribs burned where the rock had kissed me. Behind me, dead feet scraped and splashed. Hakon was fastest because Hakon had always been fast, even dead. His broken jaw clicked with each step. The climb saved me. I knew wet masts, bird cliffs, and walls climbed for apples. I found holes where armored men found stone. Hakon tore leather from my heel. Kettle broke a ledge, fell, and climbed again. Dead men have time. I reached the top on my belly, rolled, and kicked a loose stone down. It struck Hakon's brow and knocked him into the 2 behind him. They tangled. I laughed once, sharp and stupid from terror, then crawled to my feet inside the shrine. 5 idols ringed a stone bowl blackened by old offerings. They were weather-worn, faceless in places, but I knew them because every child on our coast knows the shapes even when he pretends not to fear them. A one-eyed figure with ravens carved on his shoulders. A broad one with hammer raised. A straight-backed warrior missing a hand. A woman with a cloak of feathers and cats worn almost smooth at her feet. A narrow smiling shape, neither man nor woman nor beast, with a mouth that had survived the weather too well. Odin. Thor. Tyr. Freyja. Loki. Rain hammered the bowl. My split knuckles bled over its rim as I grabbed for balance. The storm stopped. Not faded. Not passed. Stopped. Every raindrop hung in the air around me. The sea froze mid-crash against the reef. Hakon's hand paused above the ledge, nails black with sand. The thunder held itself inside the clouds. 5 voices entered my skull, each one too large for bone. They did not ask if I wanted to live. Gods do not waste breath on answers already obvious. Something opened behind my eyes. It was not a scroll, not a runestone, not any craft of men, but my mind shaped it into words because otherwise I think I would have gone mad. The saga system had awakened in me. Worthy hostile victories would earn renown and divine favor. Not slaughter. Not cutting helpless throats. Not finishing a man who could not raise hand or weapon. A victory had to be against a true enemy with will or hunger enough to threaten me or those under my protection. 5 renown marks would fill the first saga level. Lesser worthy victories could grant 1 mark, a named mythic foe could grant more. Each level would raise my body by degrees, never by miracle, might for force, speed for movement, toughness for breath, bone, and the stubborn work of not dying. A level could make a swing heavier or a sprint longer. It would not make mail useless, cliffs flat, wounds painless, poison harmless, or 10 enemies polite enough to fight one at a time. Favor belonged to the gods, and the gods were not friends sharing a bench. Thor loved direct force, storms, courage that met a blow and answered louder. Odin loved knowledge, hidden paths, sacrifice, deception seen and used. Tyr loved clean mastery, oaths spoken and kept when blood made them costly. Freyja loved cedar, spirit sense, beauty sharpened into danger, the trance where fear became a blade. Loki loved speed, tricks, masks, wrong-footed enemies, and doors no honest man noticed. Their gifts could be learned, but learning was not owning. A spear pattern still needed a spear and practice. A trick seen once in panic would fail if my hands had not trained it. A divine gift could open a road. My feet still had to run it. Odin offered rune sight, visible hidden marks, false surfaces, weak points in spells, and the anchors binding magic to matter. It could not read minds, recover perfect history, judge moral worth, or reveal an enemy outside my line of sight. Use it too long or too wide, and memories would pay the cost. Not memories I chose. Not memories I could bargain back. Thor offered storm strength, hammer force through limb and weapon, the power to break shield rims, doors, ribs, and fear. Each burst would add strain rather than consume a clean number. Trembling came first, then cramps, then torn muscle, a stumbling heart, and death if pride kept asking after the body had answered. Rest, warmth, food, and time could pay that debt. Courage could not erase it. Tyr offered oath edge, clear timing and steadier hands with a weapon I had already practiced, strengthened by a sworn battle oath. He offered no instant mastery. Break that oath, and the gift would seal against me, not for a moment, but as judgment. Freyja offered cedar, spirit sense, and battle trance. I could feel the dead, hear the thin cries between worlds, and move inside the red calm where pain came late. But spirits feel a gaze. Predators, living and otherwise, follow lights in the dark. Loki offered speed, trickery, false shapes, and fragments of change. Every use would carry a complication no man could predict. A door might open onto fire. A stolen face might bring its owner's dead. A quick foot might arrive exactly where a trap waited. I could equip only 2 gifts at first. Favor with one god could anger another. Roads would cross, compete, and close. There would be no carrying every god in my belt like knives. 5 roads. 2 hands. 1 beach of dead men climbing after me. The rain began to fall again. 3 weeks before the storm, I had been gutting cod beside my father's boat while Elsten promised land from a dry pier. We owed half our catch to another man's storehouse. My father owned a patched net, a tired boat, and a debt that smiled whenever we ate. Sten spoke of silver, shares, and a strip of shore a family could work without bowing. So I signed on with a fish knife, smoked boots, and the kind of reckless smile poor young men use when they gamble themselves. The crew named me Peasant Eirik before we cleared the fjord. By the second storm I had beaten 2 of them up the mast in a gale, and they still used the name, but softer. Astrud Ulfsdottir called me climber, or idiot, depending on how useful I was. Leif, Sten's 16-year-old son, asked once how to climb without looking afraid. I told him to look down only after the work was done. That was before the storm ate us and the dead climbed toward the shrine. Now the shrine stones shook under dead hands, and every memory of ordinary hunger felt like a tale told about some other fool. Hakon pulled himself over the ledge. His jaw hung sideways, but the rest of him knew me. Behind him came 2 rowers, then a woman named Ragnar with a broken neck, then Kettle brought back dragging his axe. They climbed into the shrine one by one, water streaming from mail and hair. Pale marks shimmered above them in my sight, not words exactly, but meanings the saga pressed into me. Drowned raider. Bound corpse. Weak alone. Tireless together. Kettle's mark burned darker. Bound corpse. Heavy armor. Battle memory remains. The gods waited. I could feel their attention as pressure on my skin. Thor's was heat under thunderheads. Odin's was a knife of winter light. Tyr's was the weight of a sword laid flat before judgment. Freyja's was a heartbeat in a dark room where unseen things listened. Loki's was a grin behind my ear. I chose Thor first. Heat slammed through my chest so hard I staggered. For an instant the cold vanished. My fingers tightened around the broken oar, and the wood groaned. Thunder rolled under my ribs. I felt larger, not in flesh, but in reach, as if my anger had grown arms. Hakon lunged. I met him with the oar shaft and drove him backward into the one-eyed idol. Stone cracked. Hakon's spine cracked with it. The blow should have been impossible from my stance, with one foot slipping and my ribs bruised. It felt glorious for half a breath. Then my heart stumbled. Fire ran down both arms. My breath came thin. Thor gave strength. He did not give a new body to spend it with. Kettle swung his axe. I ducked too late. The blade clipped my shoulder, tore wool and skin, and spun me across the shrine floor. Pain flashed white. The dead crowded in, not roaring, not cursing, just closing the ring. Numbers still mattered. Armor still mattered. My shoulder mattered very much. Tyr had no time to teach me a weapon. Freyja might alert every corpse, and Loki's speed carried a complication. Strength alone would get me surrounded. I needed to know what held dead flesh upright. I chose Odin. The world opened in blue fire. Runes crawled beneath dead skin like worms made of light. They gathered around iron nails hammered into the backs of necks and along the spine, old work, deep work, ugly as a hook through a fish's gill. One binding mark repeated on every nail. Farther down the cliff, a thicker strand of runelight crossed the visible beach and vanished around the headland. I could see where the trail went. I could not see what waited beyond the rock. The sight tried to widen along every visible binding line and every trace of the stolen storm. I forced it back, but the price had chosen. The price came with no warning. My mother's tune vanished. Not my mother. I could see her hands moving over net cord. I could see the line beside her mouth when she smiled without wanting anyone to notice. I knew she had hummed as she worked, knew the sound had once warmed our room in winter, knew I had carried it into sleep. But the tune itself was gone. A space opened where it had been, clean as a cut. I nearly dropped the oar. Kettle raised his axe for my skull. I forced the sight narrow, not closed, not yet. One nail. One mark. One answer. The broken oar was too short. A rusted shrine spear leaned against the wall behind Thor's idol, ceremonial once, forgotten now, its head pitted but still sharp enough to hate flesh. I rolled under Kettle's swing, seized the spear, and called Thor in a burst that made my wounded shoulder scream. I drove the shaft into Hakon's chest, not to kill him, because dead men laugh at that, but to pin him against the cracked idol. Then I used him as a step. My foot hit Hakon's sternum. My next hit Kettle's mail. I climbed the dead giant as if he were wet rigging, got one hand around his neck, and found the iron nail under rotted hair. Kettle reached back. His fingers closed on my forearm. Mail scraped my skin. If he pulled me down, the others would bury me. I braced both feet against his back and tore. The nail came free with a sound like ice breaking under a boot. Kettle collapsed. Not fell. Collapsed. One moment he was a broad dead man with a battle axe. The next he was meat and mail, emptied of the thing that had made him stand. Renown flickered through me, small and hot. The others turned too slowly. Now I had the rule. Not victory, but a road toward it. I used the shrine because open ground belonged to numbers. Up the broken idol. Across the fallen roof beam. Down behind Ragnar. Spear shaft across her throat to pull her off balance. Knife under hair. Fingers on cold iron. Tear. She dropped. A rower caught my ankle. I let myself fall, twisted, and drove both heels into his face with Thor's gift snapping through my legs. My calves cramped at once. Worth it? His grip loosened. I found the nail. Hakon pulled free of the spear and came again, chest torn open. He had shared dried fish with me 2 nights ago and cheated at dice badly enough to embarrass us both. I hated what moved him. I hated that his face was there for it to use. Stay down, I said. He did not. I put my knife through his wrist, pinned it to the shrine bowl, and took the nail from his neck. When he fell with his cheek against my boot, almost as he had started. The last corpse climbed over Kettle's body. I had no clean strength left. Thor's heat had become a furnace burning damp straw. My arms shook. My shoulder bled. I jammed the spear but between 2 floor stones, let the corpse impale itself through the belly, and slid past while it clawed at the shaft. The nail came free under my thumb. Rain finished falling. For a moment, only the sea spoke. The saga burned inside my sight. Worthy hostile victory. Renown gained, 1. Renown, 1 of 5. Favor gained, 1 with Thor, for meeting force with force. Favor gained, 1 with Odin, for seeing the binding and breaking the spell. I laughed because I was alive and because I had just fought dead friends under the eyes of gods and because terror sometimes comes out with teeth. A choice followed. I could deepen Thor's gift, make the next burst hit harder, perhaps hard enough to crush mail or split a shield. Or I could deepen Odin's rune sight, not wider, but narrower. The distinction slid into me like a hook. Wider sight would show more and take more. Narrower sight would let me focus on 1 weapon, 1 wound, 1 rune, and pay less often. A fisherman survives by knowing when not to cast the whole net. I spent Odin's 1 favor and chose narrow focus for rune sight. Odin favor returned to none. Odin approved. Thor did not withdraw, but I felt his impatience. The 2 gifts settled in me like rival guests at the same bench, each certain the other had taken too much room. Then someone screamed below the western cliff. The scream came again, thin against the wind, and alive. I checked my bleeding shoulder and the dead at my feet before following the scream. Gifts did not forgive stupidity. I left Kettle's heavy axe and took his belt knife. From Ragnar I took wet cord, from Hakon, a whetstone. His pouch also held a carved bit of amber. I left that with him. I dragged the bodies away from the shrine entrance because dead things had risen once and I disliked giving the island a neat pile to use again. Then I looked down from the cliff. The beach was worse in grey daylight. Wreckage, barrels, arrowheads, and bodies covered the strand. 2 dragger tore at a surviving horse farther downshore. Beyond it rose black ridges, peat, thorn, bent pine, and a stream falling from high ground. Gulls wheeled without landing. Even the island's living things had learned caution. Cold, wet wool, bad water, infection, and hunger could finish what monsters missed. The saga offered roads, not bread. I still needed shelter, food, and a way off the island. The scream came a 3rd time. I moved along the cliff, using narrow sight only when rock hit the cove. Each glance tugged at memory, but my father's face and Sigrid's laugh remained. My mother's tune did not. At the cove, I found Astrid Ulfsdottir standing knee-deep in surf with a split shield. 3 dragger pressed her from the shallows. A 4th crawled from under an overturned boat. Astrid's sword arm hung red and useless. Blood ran from her shoulder down her wrist and made her grip shine. She had the shield in her left hand, cracked across the painted boss, and every time a corpse lunged, she rammed it back with the rim. Her stance was wrong because the water pulled at her legs. Her jaw was clenched hard enough to break teeth. "Astrid!" I shouted from above. She did not look up. "Good. Looking up kills. Tell me you have more than noise," she said. "When I move, kneel. That is your plan. It is the part you need." The cove wall descended in shelves. One Draeger's nail showed at the neck, another stood over loose stone. I kept the shrine spear and saved Thor's strength for the jump. I ran along the shelf. The first Draeger turned at the sound. Astrid dropped. I jumped. Thor's strength hit as my feet left stone. The world narrowed to cold air and the spear in my hand. I had kept the rusted shrine spear because bad steel is better than proud empty fingers. I threw it with every lesson my fisherman's life had given me: seal from a boat, bird from a cliff, rope weight to a man on a pier. The spear punched through the first Draeger's open mouth and pinned its skull to the overturned boat. I landed on the second feet first. We crashed into the foam. Cold swallowed us. Its hands found my throat underwater. Dead fingers are strong because they do not care what breaks. I jammed Kettle's belt knife under its chin, felt iron behind the skull, and pried. The nail did not come. My lungs burned. Thor offered force. Odin offered the line. I chose the line, found the nail higher than expected, and hooked it with 2 fingers. The corpse folded in the water and nearly pinned me under it. Astrid's shield smashed the third Draeger's knee sideways. It fell without pain. She stepped in and drove the broken shield rim into its neck, holding it down. "Nail," I gasped, spitting salt. "What?" "Back of neck." She understood quickly. Astrid understood most useful things quickly. She shifted her weight, trapped the corpse with her knee, and ripped at the hair until iron showed. The Draeger clawed her thigh. I lunged and cut its wrist. She tore the nail free. The fourth rose behind her. I saw it too late to shout more than her name. Astrid turned anyway, as if my fear had weight. The corpse's hand struck her broken shield and drove her back. She slipped. Its teeth snapped at her face. I called Thor again. It was not the clean heat from the shrine. It came ragged, like pulling fire through wet wool. My legs nearly failed. I grabbed the pinned spear shaft, ripped it sideways, and freed it from the boat with the Draeger skull still skewered on the head. The wood split. I had a half spear now, ugly and unbalanced. I drove it across the fourth corpse's back, not piercing, just forcing it down long enough for Astrid to get her good knee under herself. She used my own fish knife. I do not know when she had taken it from the surf. She drove it under the Draeger's chin until the blade rang on iron. I grabbed the neck from behind. Together we tore the nail loose. The pinned corpse still clawed at the boat, mouth ruined around the spearhead. Astrid stood over it, breathing hard. "This one?" "Same." "Good. I am tired of new rules." She braced a boot on its chest and wrenched the spear free while I took the nail. Then the cove was ours. Astrid looked at my torn sleeve, my bleeding shoulder, the dead at our feet, and the cliff above. "You always arrive by falling out of the sky. Only when I want to impress someone." My reckless smile came out without permission. It hurt my split lip. She stared at me for half a breath, then laughed once despite the corpses, the cold, and the blood. That one laugh made the whole island seem less certain of itself. "You look like a drowned goat," she said. "But an impressive one. Do not make me regret being alive. Too late. That starts at birth." She snorted and immediately winced, pressing her wounded arm to her ribs. We bound each other's wounds with strips cut from a dead man's tunic after checking him for runes. Then we searched the cove and found hard bread, sour ale, a dented cooking pot, line, flint, and one cloak less soaked than mine. Astrid kept watch while I dragged everything above the tide. I felt guilty for being glad about each useful thing and took it anyway. Survival is rude work. It does not wait for grief, and it does not let the living refuse what the dead no longer need. We crouched behind the overturned boat while sleet rattled against its hull. Astrid told me what she had seen. Before dawn, while I must have been senseless on the beach, a longship had slid into the fog without oars touching water. Its crew wore old ringmail and moved like drowned men. Their captain stood at the prow with a crown of whalebone around a blue forehead. He carried a sword green with age. An iron stake had been driven through his ribs, but he walked around it as if it were jewelry. He took survivors, she said. My mouth dried despite the sea. Who? 3 I saw chained. Maybe more below the rail. Sten's boy was alive. Leaf? Alive when they dragged him. Kicking, even. Good boy, I thought, and hated that the word sounded like something older men had once thought of me. Astrid nodded toward the headland. They went behind the island. That matched the rune strand I had seen from the shrine. A hidden channel. A ship. A dead king perhaps, or something worse wearing a king's pride. The Cove victory brought 1 renown mark. 2 of 5. Thor approved, but granted no favor. Other divine paths stirred at the edges. 2 gifts still meant 2 choices. Your eyes changed, Astrid said. That is inconvenient. Explain. I told her about the 5 paths, the 2 gift limit, Thor's exhaustion, and Odin's memory price. I told her he had taken my mother's song. Astrid's expression changed by a finger's width. For her, that was a long embrace. Can you bring it back? No? Then spend the next memories better. It was a hard kindness. I preferred it to pity. We shared 1 piece of hard bread and 3 swallows of ale. Then we climbed toward the headland to find the dead king's ship. The island fought through thorn, loose stone, peat water, and wind that changed between ridges. Ground that looked firm hid moss over black pools. Steam rose from sulphurous cracks warm enough to melt frost but foul enough to sting the throat. The ridges blocked any straight view toward the hidden channel, forcing us to climb for every glimpse and descend into hollows where sound carried badly. A raven watched from a dead pine without calling. Nothing about the place felt empty. It felt occupied by things patient enough to remain unseen. Astrid moved well for a woman with 1 working arm and blood loss in her face. She kept her split shield though I told her it was more weight than defense now. She told me I was welcome to catch the next axe with my smile. We compromised by binding the shield tighter with cord so the 2 cracked halves would not flap. My shoulder, ribs, and thigh throbbed. Thor had left the tremble of a full day's net hauling. I wanted fire and my mother's lost tune. Anger kept me walking. We found the first non-human dead near the stream. At a bend where black water ran over red stones, 3 bodies lay under a net of kelp though the sea was far below. They were not our crew. They were small, thick-limbed things with grey-green skin, webbed fingers, and flat noses pierced with bits of shell. Their mouths had too many small teeth. Spears of bone and driftwood lay beside them. 1 wore a necklace of human finger bones polished smooth. Trows? Astrid murmured. That was 1 name. My grandmother had used another for things that lived in sea caves and stole iron from boats. I had always assumed she used them to keep children from wandering at low tide. 1 of the bodies twitched. I raised the broken spear. Astrid caught my wrist. Look first. Good advice. Annoying from someone bleeding through my bandage. I opened rune sight narrowly. No binding nail. No Drager mark. Something else clung to the Trows' ribs, a pale hook of drowned wool, not controlling it fully, but feeding after death. It snapped when I looked too long, and the body sagged. Not risen, I said. Killed by the same ship, maybe. Used after. Astrid knelt and studied tracks in the mud. More came through alive. Small feet. Bare. Carrying weight. Toward the channel. Away first. Then dragged back. The island had more than dead raiders. Good. Terrible, but good. A place with only 1 enemy teaches 1 answer. A place with several enemies kills men who learn slowly. At a narrow gorge, the Trows found us first. 5 shapes rose from holes under the bank, skin slick with mud, eyes black and bright. Living, not dead. Smaller than men, fast over stone, carrying barbed bone spears and nets weighted with shells. 1 wore a cap made from a gull skull. Another had a strip of red cloth from our sail tied around its arm. They clicked at each other, then at us. Astrid lifted her shield. Friends of yours. I was about to blame you. The first net flew low. I jumped it, barely, and the weights cracked against my shin. A spear jabbed for my belly. I twisted aside and struck the shaft down with the shrine spear. The Trow let go before the force could break its wrist. Smart. Another darted behind Astrid's wounded side. She turned too slowly. Thor wanted a burst. I denied him. Too early. If I spent strength on the first rush, the last enemy would own my lungs. Rune sight showed no binding marks on the Trows, only old net scars and the same red sailcloth stolen from our wreck. Their eyes kept cutting toward the holes behind us. I guessed they were hungry defenders rather than rolled servants. A guess could still get us killed. Back! I shouted, and not to a street. The Trows clicked louder. One lunged anyway. I sidestepped, hooked its ankle with the spear butt, and shoved it face first into the stream. Not killing. A second slashed my thigh with a shell knife. Pain flared. Astrid smashed that one with her shield, hard enough to send it rolling into the bank. A third leaped onto my back. Its teeth snapped at my ear. Then the gorge filled with a roar. Not mine. Not Astrid's. A white bear came down from the upper rocks. It was lean from winter, scarred across the muzzle, and far larger than any bear I had seen near home. Its fur was matted with blood where bone spears had wounded it. One eye was clouded. Around its neck hung a broken trow net. Fraser's warning brushed my mind, predator drawn by blood, spirit stink, fear, and the bright flare of divine gifts. The Trows scattered. The bear chose us because we were taller, warmer, and less familiar. Now? Astrid said. Now. Thor hit my legs as the bear charged. I did not try to meet it. I liked my insides arranged as they were. I threw myself sideways, grabbed a hanging root, and swung across the stream. The bear's shoulder struck the bank where I had stood and tore earth loose. Astrid drove her shield rim into its wounded muzzle. Brave. Nearly fatal. The bear swiped. The blow shattered the shield's outer board and flung her into the mud. The Trow leader shrieked from a hole. His people answered from both banks. Nets flew, not at us now, but at the bear. One tangled its foreleg. Another caught its head. The bear reared, snapping lines. The choice was plain, fight both sides and lose, or turn enemies against the greater threat. I chose the third road. Astrid, left bank. She spat mud and rolled behind a stone. I ran along the right bank, shouting, waving the spear, making myself a warm loud problem. The bear lunged. I climbed a wet rock face 3 body lengths before sense could object. The bear rose under me, claws gouging stone. I called Thor in my right arm only, as little as I could, and drove the spear down into the net around its neck, pinning rope to fur. A Trow understood. The leader sprang from hiding and wrapped another weighted line around the spear shaft. Astrid, seeing the same thing, hooked the line with her broken shield brace and pulled with her whole body. The bear twisted. The spear snapped. The rope tightened against its throat and wounded muzzle. I dropped onto its back because all other places were worse. Fur filled my hands. The bear bucked, and my world became white hair, blood, and flying stones. Odin showed me one mark that was no rune, the old scar over the clouded eye, thin bone beneath. Not magic. Anatomy. A weak place earned by some past fight. I drew Kettle's knife and struck there. The bear threw me off before the blade went deep enough. I hit the stream. Cold took my breath. Above me, Astrid shouted and the Trows clicked in frenzy. The bear turned toward me, half strangled, half blind, all rage. I had one arrowhead dart. I threw from the water. Thor lent the throw, not enough to shatter me, enough to make the ugly little weapon fly true. It struck the same scar. The bear stumbled. The Trow leader drove a bone spear into its open mouth. That ended it. Not instantly. Nothing that large dies politely. The bear crashed through the bank, snapped a net, took 3 staggering steps, and fell with a sound like a boat dropped from a crane. The gorge went silent except for water. The shared kill earned 1 renown mark. 3 of 5. Odin approved the weak point strike, Frasier noticed the spirit scent, Loki enjoyed the alliance with creatures that had tried to net me. The Trow leader watched me over his bone spear. I lowered my knife first. He tapped his blue necklace, pointed downstream, mimed a crown, and drove his spear into the ground. Rolled? I asked. The Trow spat into the stream. That translated well enough. We took bear meat, sinew, and 1 claw. The Trows took liver, fat, and net lines. The island's living things hated roll too. That did not make them friends. It made them possible. We climbed until the hidden channel opened below us. The island folded there like a wound. Two cliffs leaned together so tightly that from the sea the entrance would look like shadow under rock. Inside, black water lay calmer than it had any right to be, shielded from wind, deep enough for a longship. Rold's vessel rested at the far bank, grounded but upright, its hull dark with age and tar. Shields lined the rail, each painted with an eye scratched out. At the prow, a carved serpent head thrust forward with its mouth open. Its teeth were red. Not painted red. Wet red. At the mast hung 9 drowned men. They swayed though no wind reached them. Ropes ran from their necks to the yardarm, and their bare feet turned slowly over the deck. 9. Odin's number, insult or offering or both. Their faces were grey. Some had been our crew. Some were older, skin tight over bone. Their tongues protruded black between teeth. Ravens should have been on them, but no bird entered the channel. Beneath the hanging corpses stood the captain. King Rold the salt-buried looked less rotten than his crew and more wrong for it. He was tall, with shoulders wrapped in ring mail gone green at the edges. Salt and cold had dried his blue-white skin hard against the skull. A whalebone crown circled his brow, every point carved with runes. One point had cracked, whether from age or an old enemy who failed to finish the work. His beard hung in stiff ropes, and his eyes held the color of deep ice. An iron rune stake as long as my arm had been driven through his ribs. The stake pulsed with stolen stormlight. Every binding strand I had seen on the island knotted through it. The storm that wrecked us had not belonged to sky and sea. Rold had stolen it, pinned it into his dead body, and spent it like a miser clipping one coin at a time. The crown carried command. The stake carried force. Together they made the dead king look invincible, which meant our first useful task was learning where the appearance ended. Near the stern, 3 living raiders were chained to a rowing bench. Leif was one. Sten's son sat with his back straight despite a chain around his neck and blood down his temple. Beside him crouched Bjarni, one of our older oarsmen, his left hand missing 2 fingers it had possessed yesterday. The third was red-haired Orm, cold burned across the scalp. I saw another shape below the rail, a corpse waiting orders. 6 Draeger guarded them in old mail. More stood along the deck. Not all were ours. Some wore helmets from older wars, nose guards bent, cheek plates black with age. Astrid went still beside me. We rush the gangplank, she said. We die on the gangplank. Then we climb down the stern. We die at the stern with variety. Her jaw tightened. I understood. Watching prisoners breathe makes patience feel like betrayal. Leif was a boy, and Astrid had been paid to keep Sten's people alive. But there were at least 15 dead on deck, 6 close guards, Rold himself, and whatever waited below. We had a broken spear, 2 knives, 1 dented pot, bare meat, half a shield, and the help of gods who charged interest. Gods reward boldness. They do not forbid counting. We backed from the cliff edge into a hollow screened by thorn. There, while the channel groaned below, Astrid told me the full of what she had seen after the wreck. Astrid had washed into the cove, cut herself from rigging, and watched grey fog carry Rold's ship from the hidden channel. His corpses chained the living and nailed the dead. A kelp woman sang one fleeing man back to them. Fraser's path stirred at that. Spirit sense would have heard such a thing sooner. It might also have made the kelp woman hear me from across the island. No free gifts. Rold spoke. I asked. Once. To Sten's son. He called him Bloodor. Bloodor? Maybe sacrifice. Maybe rower. Maybe both. I looked again through a slit in the thorn, not with rune sight yet. Rold walked slowly around his deck, touching the rail, the mast, the serpent prow. He moved like a man inspecting property. The Draeger gave him space. His crown points glimmered whenever a corpse hesitated. The stake in his ribs flashed whenever the channel water rippled with stormlight. He is bound to the ship, I said. You know that. I suspect that. Knowing costs memories. Then suspect harder before you spend. She was right. We needed a plan that did not begin with me staring at Rold until I forgot my sister's name. We made a smokeless fire, seared bare meat, and held our hands near it until they obeyed. The meal tasted of blood and borrowed victory. We boiled water, cleaned the gashes, and stitched them with bone needle and bear sinew. The saga closed nothing. The ugly stitches were ours. While we worked, we counted enemies. Rolled at center. 6 crown guards near prisoners. 4 deck walkers by the mast. 2 at prow. At least 3 below, judging by movement through the oar ports. The hanging 9, uncertain. They might be corpses only, or weapons waiting for command. The channel banks gave us height but little cover once we descended. The gangplank was death. Swimming was worse. The ship's mooring lines ran to old iron rings set in the cliff. Above those rings, the rock face showed cracks and loose shale. Odin whispered through pattern, not words. Rold's magic held the ship against wind and tide. It did not hold the cliff. Astrid followed my gaze to the shale slope above the channel. No, she said. I have not spoken. Your face spoke. I disliked it. Avalanche. That is not a plan. That is weather with guilt. The slope is already broken. If stones hit the deck, guards raise shields. We slide behind them, cut the prisoners loose, and use the confusion. And rolled. I look once. Narrowly. Crown, stake, ship. Then we find what breaks. You said looking costs memories. So does losing. She studied the slope, the deck, the prisoners. We need more hands. I thought of the Trows. Maybe. Before dusk we returned to the gorge. Shells, red sailcloth, and a fish skeleton pointed toward a cave below the channel. We approached without trusting the invitation. The cave stank of kelp, seal dung, and trow. We did not enter fully. I set the bear claw on a rock, then drew a whalebone crown in mud and struck it with my knife. The trow leader emerged upside down from a crack above us, silent enough that Astrid nearly stabbed him in the foot. Negotiation with Trows is mostly gesture and mutual suspicion. Rold had hunted them for years, perhaps decades, taking their dead and sometimes their living. He had sealed their deeper caves with storm ice. They hated the crown. They feared the stake. They would not board the ship. The deck was cursed, their leader made clear by spitting and touching his blue stones. But they would cut mooring ropes from the water if the crown cracked. They would throw nets from below if the stormlight weakened. Not before. Helpful cowards, Astrid muttered as we climbed back. Living cowards, I said. That is the useful kind. She glanced at me. You ran from the beach. I did. Then I will rephrase. Please don't. Loki offered tricks while Thor bristled and Odin stayed cold. Replacing either gift before rolled meant losing force or sight. I kept both and accepted the shape of my mistake and my strength together. Night came early. Rold's ship glowed faintly in the channel, whalebone crown and iron stake answering each other with pale pulses. Leaf and the others huddled under guard. The hanging 9 turned slowly. Somewhere under the deck, something scraped wood from beneath. We slept in turns for less than an hour each, wrapped in damp cloaks, knives in hand. I dreamed of my mother mending nets in silence. Before dawn, I opened Rune Sight and looked at Rold. Not wide. Not the island. Not the ship entire. One enemy. 3 questions. Who holds the wheel? What holds the storm? What ends him? Blue fire answered. Mythic foe, Rold the salt buried. Dead king. Shipbound. Storm thief. Feeder beneath the prow. His gifts burned in harsh shapes around him. Drowned king's grip, command through dead hands and cold water. Hellfrost, breath that sealed wet cloth, skin, and courage in killing ice. Command the unburied, the power that drove nails through corpses and made them soldiers without rest. Then the anchors. The whalebone crown guarded his will. Not his life, because life had left him long ago, but the throne inside him, the command by which he ruled dead men and made them obey across the island. The iron heartstake held stolen storm. It had not killed him. It pinned power into him, power taken from wrecks, sacrifices, and old weather rights carved into the ship's ribs. Break the crown, and his command would falter. Break the stake, and the storm would tear loose. Break one, and Rold weakened. Break both, and the salt buried ended. The sight showed more visible anchors than I could safely hold, feeder lines descending beneath the prow, secondary cracks in the crown, storm runes cut into the deck. I shut the door before the price chose another memory. Too late for all of it. Sigrid's face blurred at the edges. I grabbed a stone until my nails hurt. I could still name her. I could still hear her laugh. I could remember the missing tooth, the ribbon, the way she pretended not to cry when I sailed. But when I tried to hold her whole face, parts of it smeared like charcoal in rain. No more, I told Odin. The god did not apologize. Astrid watched me across the fireless hollow. What did it take? Part of my sister. She looked away first. That was mercy. What did it give? Crown guards his will. Stake holds stolen storm. Breaking one weakens him. Breaking both ends him. Can the crown be cut? Whalebone. Old runes. Cracked at one point. The stake? Iron. Older than it looks. There is a crack in it near the head, but striking it with a blade will turn the edge. Then we need hammer force. Thor warned, pleased. Or leverage, Odin whispered without sound. I hated that both were right. We shaped the plan around facts, not courage. Courage would be needed, but as fire, not as roof beam. First, loosen the shale slope above the channel. We had already tested it in the night, prying stones with spear fragments and bare bone. Second, draw the deck guards under the fall. Astrid would start visible on the cliff path, shield raised, insulting rolled loudly enough to wake dead pride. That part required no divine gift. Third, I would trigger the slide from above, then ride the lower edge down behind the shield wall. I objected to the word ride. Astrid said fall was more honest. Fourth, she would reach prisoners. Her wounded sword arm made cutting slow, so we gave her Kettle's belt knife and the sharper shell knife taken from a dead Trow. Leaf and the others had hands enough once freed. Fifth, I would go for the crown first if possible, because without command the guards might falter or even strike wrong targets. If Rold forced me away, I would aim for the stake crack. Sixth, if the crown cracked, Trows in the water would cut moorings and throw nets at deck legs. They had agreed to nothing more, and perhaps not even that. Seventh, if all failed, we jumped into the channel and drowned with tactical dignity. Astrid disliked the seventh part. I told her it was only there for completeness. We lashed the bear claw into a hook, bound Astrid's shield with rawhide, and fixed 3 arrowheads to a weighted cord for catching a crown point. I practiced until 2 casts in 6 struck true. Need did not place skill in my fingers. I kept narrow focus as my only rune sight refinement. Touching a bound object could guide one narrow look, but lingering would cost memory. Thor resented it. Not in words. My next attempt to call a tiny spark of storm strength came slow, heavy, like lifting a wet sail alone. Favor rivalry, made flesh. I had pleased Odin twice in the shape of the same day. Thor would still answer, but he wanted proof I would not turn every fight into squinting at runes while strong enemies laughed. This is foolish, Astrid said while tightening her shield strap with her teeth. The avalanche? All of it. Gods in your head. Dead kings. Mud allies. Me trusting a fisherman who smiles before falling. You can stay. I can also stab my own foot. I am listing bad choices, not taking suggestions. Below, Rold's crew began to move. The dead king walked to the prisoners. Leaf rose on his knees before the chain stopped him. Rold placed one blue hand on the boy's head. The whalebone crown pulsed. The hanging 9 opened their eyes. No more waiting. Astrid stepped onto the cliff path where the ship could see her. Rold, she shouted, voice cracking across the channel. Your crown looks carved from fish scrap. Every dead face turned. I had expected fear. My stomach gave me plenty. But under it came a savage joy. The kind a man feels when the trap is poor, the enemy strong, and the only road left runs downhill. I put both hands under the loosened stone at the top of the shale slope. Thor, I thought, now. Storm strength hit my back and legs. I heaved. The stone shifted an inch. My shoulder screamed. Thor pushed hotter, angry, and delighted. I heaved again, roaring through my teeth, and the slope gave way. The cliff began to fall. The first stones hit the channel like thrown anvils. Water leaped. Drager along the rail lifted shields on dead instinct. Rold turned from Leaf and raised his green sword, crown flaring with command. More stones hammered the deck. One smashed through a shield and took the arm beneath it. Another crushed an oar bench. Shale poured after, not enough to bury the ship, but enough to turn order into noise. I came down with it. Calling it sliding would flatter me. I fell on my feet, my backside, my shoulder, my feet again, chasing a sheet of wet shale while larger rocks bounded on either side. Thor kept my legs from folding at the first impact and charged me interest on every heartbeat. I hit the deck behind the raised shields, rolled under a swinging spear, and drove Kettle's knife into the back of the nearest guard's neck. No nail. Different binding. The blade skidded off an iron plate under the skin. The guard turned. Its mouth opened, and black water poured out. Odin, one glance. Room focus caught the plate's edge. I hooked it with the bear claw tool and ripped sideways. The plate tore free with a strip of dead flesh. The guard collapsed against the rail. Not all Rold's corpses were made like ours. He had improved his craft over years. Wonderful. Learning under a sword is still learning. Astrid came down the path instead of the slope, which made her the wiser of us, and leaped the last body length to the stern. Her broken shield took a spear thrust and split further. She slammed the rim into the guard's face, dropped low, and cut Leif's chain with the shell knife. Not through the iron. Through the old leather loop that fixed it to the bench. Practical woman. Hands, she barked. Leif shoved his bound wrists at her. Jani turned so she could saw his rope. Orm kicked at a Draeger's knee and got a spear but across the head for it. I needed the crown. Rold crossed the deck toward me. Stones bounced from his mail. One struck his shoulder and broke apart. He did not hurry. Kings do not hurry when they believe the world must wait. His first blow cut the shrine spear shaft in half. I had meant to parry. The sword barely slowed. Green iron hissed through wet wood and opened the air where my hand had been. I dropped the ruined shaft and backed into a shield rack. Rold's second blow came from below. I twisted. The blade sliced the outside of my thigh without reaching the great muscle. Cold pain. Hot blood. My leg buckled once, then bore weight. The saga did nothing to hide the fact that a bleeding leg changes a fight. Thor roared in me, demanding answer. I gave him my arms. I caught Rold's sword wrist with both hands before the third blow. Storm's strength crashed through my grip. For one breath I held him. For one breath I felt like a saga carving, young hero against dead king, thunder in the bones, impossible strength proving itself. Then Rold smiled. He was stronger. Not by a little. By centuries of stolen storm, dead sailors, and whatever dark thing fed under the prow. My muscles strained to failure. My wounded shoulder flashed blind. His wrist drove downward inch by inch. The sword edge kissed my collar. Warm thief, Rold said. His voice sounded like stones dragged under ice. I stole nothing from you, I snarled. You breathe. Fair enough by dead king law. Astrid slammed her shield into his knee from the side. The blow would have dropped a living man. Rold shifted half a step. That was enough. His gaze moved to her. The pressure on my arms loosened. I kicked at the whalebone crown. Not a glorious strike. A desperate heel across his brow. My boot caught the cracked point. Bone snapped. The crown flared white, then dimmed. Across the deck, 3 Draeger halted mid-strike. One guard near Leif turned and drove its spear into another's ribs. Rold's command faltered. The Trows kept their word. Lines splashed at the ship's side. Small grey hands rose from the channel water with shell knives. Mooring ropes began to part. Weighted nets flew over the rail and tangled dead legs. A Draeger fell backward into the water, and the Trows vanished under it like knives under cloth. Rold struck Astrid with his free hand. She hit the mast hard and dropped. Her shield skidded away in 2 pieces. Something in me went simple. Thor wanted all of me. I nearly gave it. I could spend everything, leap, crush, tear, and perhaps break myself empty against Rold's mail while the stake kept feeding him storm. Odin cut across the fury with cold contempt. Only fools fight the weapon their enemy has chosen. I let Rold win. My hands released his wrist. I fell backward as if my torn leg had failed. It had, partly, which helped the lie. Rold had finished every helpless target I had watched with the same proud overhand stroke. I gambled he would repeat it. He followed, sword rising. I rolled beneath the hanging ropes and drove my broken spear shaft through their knot. 9 corpses dropped from the mast. They fell onto Rold in a grey, roped mass. Their weight drove him to one knee. Dead hands, freed from hanging, clawed at anything. Some still obeyed him. Some obeyed the broken crown poorly. One bit his cheek. Another tangled its rope around his sword arm. Leaf! I shouted. Oars? Chains? Anything. The boy moved. He had been waiting for permission to become useful. He seized his loosened chain, wrapped it around a guard's throat from behind, and threw his weight backward. Jani took the guard's spear. Orm, bleeding from the scalp, crawled to Astrid and shoved her sword into her left hand. I lunged for Rold's stake. The iron jutted from his ribs, black and stormlit, the crack near its head visible now that I knew where to look. I struck it with Astrid's sword because it lay near my hand and need outran wisdom. Old iron turned the edge. The sword rang uselessly and jarred my arms numb. Rold burst upward through the hanging corpses and backhanded me into the mast. For a moment I had no breath, no sound. The deck tilted. My Thor strength guttered. My vision narrowed to Rold's blue hand reaching for my throat. He lifted me from the boards. Hellfrost poured from his mouth. White mist covered my face. I sealed my wet tunic to my skin. My fingers went numb around the wrist that held me. The cold did not merely chill. It searched. It wanted the warm places behind the ribs. I tried to kick. My injured leg answered with fire and weakness. Rold drew me close. Blood or breaks. Storm returns. Serpent feeds. Behind him, Astrid stirred. My mind reached for Tyr in that instant. Oath-edge timing. A steadier practiced weapon. Something clean and hard. The saga refused. 2 gifts equipped. Divine paths locked until rest. There would be no convenient new power because I had chosen badly or because death felt unfair. I had Thor, Odin, 1 wounded shield maiden, 1 half-freed boy, frightened raiders, Trows in the water, 9 hanging corpses, a cracked crown, and a cracked stake. Enough, if I used all of it. I opened Odin's sight through touch, 1 last narrow thread along Rold's wrist, into his ribs, to the stake. The crack shone. The price reached for Sigrid again. No. I slammed the sight shut before it could take the rest of her face. I did not need more knowledge. I needed hands. I threw Astrid's sword. Not at Rold. At Astrid. It spun badly. My numb fingers ruined the cast. Loki would have laughed and made it pretty, then perhaps turned the blade into a snake. Astrid caught it anyway because Astrid was better than divine comedy. She caught it left-handed, by the grip, from her knees. Rold turned toward the blade because kings watch weapons. I drew my fish knife with my numb right hand and jammed it under the head of the cracked stake. Not to cut. To pry. Leverage, not strength. The blade bent. My wrist screamed. The crack opened a finger's width. Astrid. I croaked. She came in low, limping, shieldless, sword in her left hand and death in her face. Rold swung the green blade toward her. Leaf's chain snapped tight around his elbow from behind. Jani drove a spear into the rope mass at Rold's legs, pinning 2 corpses and 1 ankle together. Orm threw himself against the dead king's side and was flung away for it, but the blow slowed the sword. Astrid did not strike with the sword edge. She struck the stake head with the iron pommel. The sound broke the channel. The stake did not break at first. It screamed. Iron can scream when enough hate has been hammered into it. The sound tore through my teeth and made every corpse on deck arch backward. Stormlight burst from the crack in white threads. Rold dropped me. I hit the boards and sucked air that tasted of frost, blood, and rotten rope. Again. I shouted, though Astrid was already moving. Rold seized her by the wounded arm. Her face went grey. The sword fell from her left hand. He pulled her toward the serpent prow, toward the red teeth and whatever waited below. The cracked crown flared, trying to gather command again. Draeger shook off confusion. Trow nets snapped. Leaf's chain slipped from Rold's elbow. Thor stirred in me, not as a clean gift now, but as a demand, prove the worth of force. I had almost nothing left. That mattered less than it should have. I crawled, then stood, then nearly fell because my cut thigh did not like any of those choices. I grabbed the 3-arrowhead lash from my belt, swung it once, and threw at Rold's crown. The weighted point struck bone and wrapped badly around one point. Not enough to pull it free. Enough to give me a line. I wrapped the cord around my forearm and jumped backward off the raised stern step. My weight hit the line. The cracked crown yanked sideways. Rold's head snapped toward me. The broken point tore wider. Command shattered again across the deck. A crown guard drove its spear through the serpent prow instead of leaf. Another walked straight over the rail into the water, where Trows took it apart in bubbles. Rold released Astrid and came for me. Good. I had no room to run. I went up. The mast ropes hung low after the corpses fell. I caught one, set both feet against the mast, and climbed 3 pulls before my shoulder failed. Rold's sword cut beneath my heel and shaved leather. He reached for my ankle. I kicked his crown. Bone cracked further but held. Below, Astrid recovered the sword. She could barely lift her wounded arm. Her left hand tightened around the grip. Stake! I shouted. I know. The hanging corpses writhed between us, some trying to obey Rold, some biting anything with motion. Jani and Orm fought back-to-back near the prisoner's bench. Leif had found a fallen Seeks and was using it like a boy chopping wood. Too wide. Too much shoulder. Still brave. A Drager raised an axe behind him. I let go of the rope. Falling had become an unfortunate habit. I landed on the Drager's back and drove both knees into its spine. The binding plate under its neck flashed. I had no time for clean removal. I hooked the bare claw into the plate, called the smallest spark of Thor, and ripped. The plate came free. So did a strip of my palm skin. The corpse collapsed, and Leif stared at me with eyes too large. Cut the others loose, I said. My father. The question struck harder than it should. Earl Sten had vanished in the storm. Maybe dead on some rock. Maybe chained below. Maybe walking under Rold's nail already. No answer would help the boy move. Live first, I said. Ask after. He swallowed and nodded. Rold reached the mast. His crown hung crooked now, one side cracked, runes stuttering. The stake in his ribs spat stormlight with each step. The ship groaned as moorings parted. Free water tugged at the hull. The channel current wanted to turn us sideways against rocks. Survival after victory, I thought absurdly, if victory ever came. A ship can be won and still sink. Astrid attacked the stake again. Rold blocked with his sword. She expected that. She dropped, rolled under the blade, and slammed her shoulder into the iron jutting from his ribs. Not strong enough to break it. Strong enough to drive the crack against my bent fish knife still wedged under the head. The knife snapped. So did the stake. The world went white. Storm burst from Rold's chest in a column that struck the mast, split clouds above the channel, and threw every living person flat. The sail remnants ignited blue. Half charred away, half remained hanging in scorched strips as steam rolled over the deck. The hanging corpses exploded into ropes, bones, and salt water. Rold roared, and the roar contained 3 centuries of wrecks. For a heartbeat, I saw them. Ships under black waves. Men praying to gods they had ignored on shore. Women chained in holds. Trows dragged from caves. Bears driven mad by spirit stink. A young Rold, living then, kneeling in a storm with a knife in his brother's throat and a whalebone crown before him. Not my memory. His. Odin's gift tried to take it in. I refused. Some knowledge is poison even before the price. Rold staggered. The lower half of the stake remained through his ribs, but the head and crack had broken free. Storm poured out and did not return. The crown, still intact enough to hold wool, flared desperately. Breaking one weakens him. Breaking both ends him. I seized the broken iron stake head from the deck. It burned cold. Skin stuck to it. Thor had no strength left to lend, but he gave anger, or perhaps the anger was mine and he merely approved. I drove the broken iron upward beneath Rold's whalebone crown, into the gap where the snapped point had opened. It did not go deep enough. Rold caught my wrist. His grip compressed the joint until bones ground together, but they did not break. Astrid hit the iron with the pommel. The stake fragment punched through crown and skull. Whalebone split around it. Runes went dark point by point. Rold's eyes widened, not with fear, but with insult. Kings hate endings they did not command. The sea, he whispered, owes me. Collect in hell, Astrid said. She hit the iron again. Rold the salt-buried fell. This time, the deck did not rise to meet him as servant. He struck the boards like any other corpse. The remaining Drager froze. Some collapsed at once. Some took 2 steps as if surprised by the absence inside them, then dropped. The ones in the water stopped fighting and sank. The serpent prow bled black seawater from its carved mouth and went still. Silence rushed in. Then the ship began drifting toward the rocks. Oars? Johnny shouted, because old sailors understand that battle endings are suggestions. We moved. Pain made a red tunnel around everything, but work kept me inside the world. Leif and Orm tore the last loose chain from the rowing bench while Bjarni counted the living. Astrid kicked weapons away from fallen Drager. I cut loose the remaining mooring line before it dragged us broadside. Trows scattered from the hull as the ship shifted. Their leader surfaced once, raised his bone spear, and vanished. We found 2 usable oars, then 4 more underbodies. The current turned us. Rocks waited. Bjarni took command without asking, which made him the cleverest man aboard for those breaths. Port side pull. Starboard hold. Boy, not like that unless you want to row us into your father's grave. Leif obeyed. So did I. My arms barely worked, but rowing is stubbornness with a handle. The ship scraped once, hard enough to make every plank complain, then slid free into the center of the channel. The saga chose that moment to name victory. Worthy mythic foe defeated. Rolled the salt buried. Renown gained, 2. Renown, 5 of 5. Saga level 1 reached. The next level required 8 new marks. Warmth filled the cup inside me and spilled into bone. A choice opened, might, speed, toughness. Might would make my blows heavier. Speed would keep me out of death's hand. Toughness would help me survive the wounds I already owned and the cold that waited beyond the channel. I wanted might because Rold had been stronger. I wanted speed because being grabbed by the throat teaches respect. I chose toughness because bleeding men with grand ambitions become dead men with excellent reasons. The change was gradual but real. My breathing steadied. The shake in my hands eased. Strength returned to my legs like tide creeping over sand. The cut in my thigh did not close. My shoulder did not heal. My wrist still throbbed where Rold had crushed it. But my body stopped sliding toward collapse. Thor granted 1 favor for daring the stronger enemy and striking when spent, bringing his bank to 2. Odin gave a colder flicker of approval but no favor. Perhaps he disliked my refusal to look deeper. Perhaps he mourned the 9. Perhaps gods are simply poor company after battle. Tyr stirred for the first time, drawn by the kept shape of our plan and the rescue done under pressure. Freyja's attention moved over the fallen dead. Loki enjoyed every part involving avalanches, trows, and thrown swords. Only 2 gifts equipped. No new path opened. Not yet. We had killed the dead king. Now we had to prove living meant more than not being dead. Rold's ship had been built for war before my great-grandfather's grandfather learned to spit. It was longer than Sten's vessel, deeper in the belly, with a high prow carved as Nidhogg, the serpent that gnaws at the roots of the world tree. Every line of the carving had been cut by someone who understood hunger. The hull planks were black oak, tarred and retarred until they shone like wet stone. The sail was ruined by storm fire, but spare cloth lay below, folded in oilskin and smelling of grave mold. The deck was a butcher's prayer. We counted the living. Astrid. Leif. Bjarni. Orm. Me. 5 living souls, 1 captured ship, 1 dead king, and an island that had not promised it was finished. We counted the dead next because dead things had become practical matters. Rold's corpse went first. I wanted to throw him overboard and watch the sea reject him, but Odin's sight, used without opening, prickled at the broken crown and stake. Not safe to leave whole. We stripped the whalebone crown from his skull in pieces. Each piece went into a different firepot with bare fat and splinters until the runes blackened. The stake fragments we wrapped in chain and wedged under ballast stones far from the mast. Bjarni said iron that evil should be thrown into deep water. Astrid said deep water had already proved a poor prison. She won. We searched each crown guard for binding plates before casting bodies overboard. Leif vomited twice and kept working. Below deck, we found rolled stores and crimes. We found bread, fish, fat, water, rope, tools, spare fittings, silver arm rings, amber, beads, hacked coins, and 2 gold crosses. Treasure enough to change lives if we survived the argument over shares. We found bones in the bilge. Human. Trow. Seal. Bear. Some carved. Some cracked for marrow. Under the prow, behind a panel cut with serpent scales, we found the feeder, a knot of roots, bone, and black cord shaped around a stone that pulsed like a slow heart. The thing smelled of low tide and old blood. It had drunk from the serpent's teeth whenever Rold fed it prisoners or storm. It was not alive. It was not dead. It was a mouth someone had taught to wait. Fraser's path rose in me hard enough to make my teeth ache. Spirit sense would show what lingered in it. Cedar might quiet or bind it. It would also shine me like a torch before every hungry ghost on the island. Odin could read its marks, but memories lay already torn. Thor could smash it, perhaps, and perhaps release whatever it held straight into our faces. We burn it, Astrid said. If fire wakes it, then you can give it one of your clever looks. Bjarni spat. No cursed root comes aboard my sea if I have a say. Your sea? Orm said. All seas become mine when fools are about to sink in them. Arguing meant life returning. I welcomed it for 4 breaths, then ended it. We cut the panel free and lower the whole thing onto the shore, I said. No smashing on deck. No reading unless it moves. Fire from a distance. That was less heroic than a hammer blow. It worked. We tied ropes around the panel, pried it loose with the adze, and dragged the feeder to the rail. It pulsed faster when daylight touched it. A sound came from inside, not a voice, more like bubbles under ice. Leif backed away and made a sign with shaking fingers. I wanted Odin's sight so badly my eyes hurt. Knowledge is its own hunger. I did not open it. We lowered the feeder onto a flat stone at the channel edge and soaked it in seal fat. Astrid wrapped a burning rag around a sling stone and cast it with our weighted cord, left-handed, after 2 misses and a curse that would have offended monks if any had survived nearby. The feeder burned green. Things came out with the smoke. Not shapes. Suggestions of faces. A bear's roar. A Trow child's click. A man's prayer. Fraser's attention pressed close, offering to hear, to know, to guide. I kept my eyes on the flame and my gifts as they were. The smoke blew inland, and for a moment every thorn on the ridge shivered though there was no wind. When the fire died, the stone beneath had cracked in 7 places. Good, Astrid said. You say that as if you know. I know I prefer ash. Fair. The avalanche had broken rail and deck planks, scorched the sail, damaged oars, and opened a hull seam near the waterline. Water needs little width if given time. We beached the ship properly inside the channel using poles, remaining oars, and curses. The tide was turning. Bjarni inspected the seam and gave us the face of a man deciding whether bad news should be brief or artistic. We can patch it, he said. That was your cheerful voice. I asked. That was my truthful voice. Cheerful drowned yesterday. We patched with tar, wool, planking, and nails. Leif held the lamp, Orm hammered, Bjarni checked every seam, and Astrid guarded the gangplank. I helped where strength mattered and stopped when my hands shook too badly. Thor's exhaustion had become a deep debt. Each time I thought about calling even a spark, my muscles cramped in warning. Divine power had limits. The body kept accounts. Near midday, a pack of corpse-fed gulls attacked. Not ordinary gulls. Bigger, grey-backed, with eyes filmed white from eating Rold's leavings and a taste for living wounds. They came screaming from the cliff in a dozen, then 2 dozen, wings beating sleet sideways. 1 dove for Astrid's bandaged arm. She skewered it. Another clipped Leif's oversized helmet and spun it sideways. He swung a hammer and missed by a handspan. I had no bow. I had stones. We pulled under half-raised sailcloth so corpse gulls had to dive through gaps one at a time. Astrid stabbed, Bjarni swung an oar, and I stoned wings until sky enemies became deck problems. One gull landed on the prow and opened its beak. A human voice came out. Blood or Leaf froze. Fraser's path flared. Spirit voice. Predator using grief. I hurled Kettle's knife. It struck the gull through the breast and pinned it to Nidhogg's wooden tongue. The voice stopped. Work, I told Leaf. He worked. By late afternoon the seam held. The sail was patched ugly but serviceable. We had water, food, tools, weapons, and a ship that no longer belonged to the dead. We also had one more problem. Rold's ship needed more hands than 6 to sail well in open sea. The island answered before we solved it. From the outer beach came shouting. Living shouting. We found more living voices near the wreck of Sten's ship, but no new miracle. A few survivors had held a rise above the tide with barrels, sling stones, cooking hooks, and the spite that keeps cold men upright. Astrid took their wounded in hand. Bera the cook claimed every usable pot. A frightened foreign boy named Colin showed us bitter herbs for bite fever. Leaf, still raw at the neck from Rold's chain, tore the binding nail from one last Drager and stared at it as if the world had become a lesson he disliked. I told him the only lesson worth having: first we get everyone off this island. We gathered people, barrels, spearheads, rope, water skins, and the courage left loose on the black sand. Behind us the tide touched bodies we had no strength to burn. None rose. That was the first mercy the island had offered. Morning came grey and hard. The tide had dropped, revealing more teeth in the channel than Bjarni liked and fewer than he had feared. Frost rimed the rail, though the season should not have held such cold. The deck smelled of tar, blood, smoke, and wet wool. Everyone moved slowly at first, as if sleep had made wounds honest. We had one task: make the ship earn sea. Bjarni commanded repairs. We careened the hull for an outer patch, stitched the sail, balanced the steering oar, shifted ballast, and tied treasure low. Silver, he reminded us, sinks like stone. We worked. Repair was another battle. One bad knock could drown every brave hand. Bjarni set us by skill, cursed each mistake, and drove the patch tight. It earned no renown, only a ship that might float. Bera shoved a hard heel of bread into my hand. Test your stomach before you haul, she said. I ate because she was right. By midday the ship could float clean. By afternoon the sail could hold wind if wind behaved like a tired old woman and not like a war band. We built a new yard patch from wreckage, replaced 2 oarlocks, and lashed spare shields over broken rail gaps. Rolled serpent prow remained, but Bera hung a strip of red sailcloth over its mouth because she disliked it watching her cook. The Trows appeared at low tide. Dozens of them lined the rocks near the channel mouth, silent, grey-green, black-eyed. Their leader wore the blue stones and carried the bear claw I had given as token, now tied to his spear. Behind him stood smaller Trows with shell baskets. They set the baskets down and backed away. Inside were mussels, black crabs, and a heap of tough seaweed. Poison? Orm asked. Colin examined the seaweed, sniffed, then nodded cautiously. Food. The monks dried this. The Trow leader pointed at Rold's ship, then at the sea, then struck his own chest twice. Not farewell, perhaps. Warning. Claim. Debt. All of them. I stepped to the rail and touched my fist to my chest. Rold is ended. The leader clicked. We leave, I said. He pointed north. I looked. The sea beyond the channel was dark, restless, and wrong at the horizon. A line of white lay there where no shore should be. Ice? Astrid asked from beside me. Bjarni squinted. Too far south for that much. Odin's raven circled high above the headland. One pale-eyed, one dark. Then they descended together and settled on the mast. I felt the god's attention like a nail pressed gently under the skin. Not yet, I thought. We have not even launched. The Trow leader spat into the water, then led his people away. We stowed water, food, weapons, tools, and treasure in order. Leaf declared that shares would be counted on living shore before witnesses, pleasing Tyr. Before launch, we burned what remained of Rold's curse work on shore, spare binding nails, etched bone, black cord, the last crown splinter. The smoke stank and drifted inland. No faces came out this time. At dusk, Bjarni judged the tide right. Oars, he said. Every living person took a place. Even Colin, too small for a full oar, sat beside Bera and pulled when she pulled. Astrid stood at the prow with a spear. Leif took the steering oar under Bjarni's eye. I stood midship where I could reach either side, though my body wanted the floor. Push, Bjarni ordered. The ship slid grudgingly from mud to water. For a breath, no one spoke. Rold's vessel floated under living weight, freed from its dead master, patched by hands that had no business still working. Then the channel current caught us. Pull. Bjarni Red Hand roared. We pulled. The hidden channel did not let us leave politely. The rising tide hit rocks and curled currents between cliffs. Wind struck our patched sail before it fully rose, while Bjarni guided Leif at the steering oar with useful insults. Left 2 hold. Right pull. Not that hard unless you hate the hull. Boy, feel the water before you fight it. Good. Bad. Better. Eirik, if that line slips, bite it if you have to. I took the sail line in both hands and leaned back. My crushed wrist objected. I told it to complain later. The sail lifted halfway, patched cloth snapping. Wind filled it, then spilled, then filled again. The ship surged. Oars scraped. Someone cursed. The starboard rail kissed rock with a shriek. Hold. Bjarni barked. We held. Ahead, the channel narrowed beneath 2 leaning cliffs. Between them, the sea beyond flashed grey. Freedom, if freedom had waves like shield walls and clouds low enough to club us. Then the dead under the channel woke. Not Draga. Not men. Shapes rose from the water where Rold's moorings had once sunk, drowned horses with weed manes, seal skulls on human spines, trow bones knotted into things that crawled along the rock. Lesser remnants of the feeder, perhaps, or old victims whose bindings had broken badly. They did not have command, but hunger remained. One climbed onto the port side and snapped at Bera. Colin hit it with a cooking hook. Bera split its skull with a cleaver and shoved it back. Another wrapped both arms around an oar and dragged. Leif refused to let go. The oar nearly took him overboard. I crossed the pitching benches and fought with the bear claw hook, pry fingers, kick faces, move. Thor remained a deep ache, and these remnants carried hunger rather than a binding worth another memory. Astrid speared anything that reached the prow. She fought left-handed now with the grim economy of someone who had accepted pain as weather. Leif held the steering oar too tight until Bjarni slapped the back of his head. The sea is not your enemy. Bjarni shouted. What is it then? Bigger than you. That is not the same. A wave rolled through the channel mouth and lifted us. The ship yawed. The patched sails snapped full. My line burned through my palms. If it tore free, we would turn broadside and smash against the right cliff. Thor offered one last hard pull. I refused it. My hands were already failing, and another burst could leave them useless forever. I wrapped the line once around the mast brace, used the wood as a third hand, and shouted for Orm. He threw his weight beside mine. Astrid cut the secondary line at exactly the right moment, spilling half the force before our shoulders gave way. The ship straightened. Bjarni laughed once. Again, and I'll make sailors of you. The channel mouth opened. A final shape rose from the left cliff, the last kelp woman, hair streaming, face changing from mother to sister to Astrid to no face at all. She clung to the rock above us and sang through the wind. Men faltered at the oars. Colin began to cry without stopping his pull. The song had learned our names from fear. I had promised myself no more Odin. I had not sworn it aloud, and Tyr did not seal what pride merely mutters. Still, the promise mattered. The kelp woman wore Sigrid's blurred face again, and rage made the world too simple. I did not look with ruined sight. I looked with memory. The face was wrong because my sister would never look at me with hunger. My mother had lost her tune inside me, but not the feel of her hand slapping mine away from a hot pot. Astrid's face beside mine was not a lure because Astrid was on the prow cursing in a voice no spirit would invent so well. Row? I shouted. It has nothing you need. Loki's path brushed me, delighted by denial of illusion. Frasia's path hummed, approving the refusal to answer spirit song with spirit sense. Thor lent me no strength, but perhaps he enjoyed the shout. The kelp woman leaped. Astrid threw her spear. It pinned the creature's hair to the cliff for one breath. Bera threw a cleaver. Colin, still crying, put a sling stone through the shell in its chest. The kelp woman fell behind us and struck the water just as the ship cleared the channel. Open sea took us. For several breaths, it tried to give us back. Waves slammed the bow. The patched hull flexed. Men pulled because Bjarni Red Hand roared. Leif steered because letting go would shame him forever if he lived, and kill him if he did not. The island slid past to starboard, black cliffs and thorn ridges and the ruined shrine high above the beach. Rold's channel vanished behind spray. We had launched. Not drifted. Not been blown loose by accident. Launched. Living hands had taken a dead king's ship, repaired it, provisioned it, and forced it out through teeth of stone into the northern sea. Relief settled over me harder than victory. We were off the island. We had Leif, Astrid, Bjarni, Orm, Bera, Colin, and every survivor we had found on the black shore. We had hard bread, fish, water skins, tools, weapons, treasure tied low, and a patched hull that still floated under living weight. Rold was ended. His crown was burned, his stake broken, his feeder ash. The dead on shore had fallen when his command failed, and the last hungry remnants in the channel lay behind us. Our sail was ugly, our crew wounded, our steering oar suspect, and none of that changed the truth. We had promised ourselves a way off the wreck island. We had repaired the dead king's ship with mortal hands, launched it through rock and curse, and carried the living into open sea. For the first time since the storm struck, the next breath belonged to us rather than Rold. The channel fight added one renown mark toward level 2. 1 of 8. Speed and might tempted me, raised toughness had kept me rowing. Growth would be gradual, earned, and paid for. As the island fell behind, the sky broke for the first time since wreck. Pale sunlight touched the water. Every living person looked at it as if it were treasure. Then the sun vanished behind a wall of white on the northern horizon. Ice raced across the water in white veins. It did not creep from the north like honest cold. It sprang under the waves around us, lines of frost branching faster than spilled lightning. Or struck slush. The ship lurched. Men shouted and pulled blades from the water before they locked. A skin of ice formed along the rail and over the serpent prow, sealing Bera's red cloth stiff across its mouth. Back oars. Bjarni Red Hand roared. Too late for clean rowing. The sea thickened around us. Floes knocked the hull. The patched seam groaned. The sail hung useless in sudden dead air. Then, across the new ice north of us, a footprint appeared. It pressed up from beneath first, a dark swell under white. Then the surface cracked around it and settled into a shape longer than our ship. Heel. Arch. 5 toes spread like boulders. Water steamed in the print's edges. No body stood above it. Another footprint formed farther south. Something vast walked under the storm, under the skin of the sea, under the world we understood. Each step froze water and bent it. Each step came closer. Jotun, Bjarni said. No one mocked the old word. Thor raged at the giants and wanted challenge. Odin pressed me to see and survive. Tyr warned of unsworn oaths, Freyr of old prophecy, and Loki of chains broken in the wrong order. The ravens remained on the mast. Ragnarok, Astrid said, barely loud enough. The pale-eyed raven inclined its head. Begun before its hour. Centuries early? I asked, because the saga had placed that understanding in me with the terror. Time is a rope, Odin said through the bird. Enough hands pull, and knots move. Leif stepped beside me, still pale from wounds and youth. Can it see us? The next footprint struck the ice close enough that the ship rose on the swell beneath it. Everyone grabbed wood. A crack shot toward our hull and stopped a spear length away. That answered him. From under the ice came a horn. Low. Fast. Deeper than any sound we had heard beneath the island, as if the sea itself had become its throat. It rolled through the hull into my feet. In the north, clouds opened around a shape too large to be weather and too hidden to be seen. The white horizon was not a line of ice. It was a moving wall. Odin's raven spoke again. The drowned north wakes. Giants walk where ships should pass. Old dead kings were only barnacles on the door. Helpful, Astrid said. Her voice shook. She made it sharp anyway. The black-eyed raven looked at her, and I swear it enjoyed her. I gripped the rail until my swollen wrist burned. We have wounded people, one patched ship, and enough food for days, not a war against the end of gods. Then spend days well, Odin said. You offer advice like a man throwing bones to dogs. The crew went silent at my tone. Thor approved. Odin perhaps did too, which annoyed me more. I offer sight, the raven said. Advice costs more. My missing memories throbbed. No, I said. Not now. The pale-eyed raven ruffled its feathers. Good. A tool that cuts itself to nothing serves no hand. That sounded almost like praise. I distrusted it immediately. The ice tightened around the ship. The hull creaked. Jarni began giving orders, because good sailors insult doom by working near it. Axes. Poles. Break around the seam first. Keep the hull breathing. Move weight inward. No one stands at the rail unless they want to be part of the scenery. We turned fear into labor. Axes broke ice from the hull, hot water guarded the seam, hands baled slush and shifted ballast while Astrid watched the footprints approach. Next problem, she asked. I stared at her. You said once bad choices should be listed before taken. Despite everything, I laughed. It came out cracked, but real. The next footprint stopped. Not because the giant had halted. Because the ice ahead of us bulged upward, and something under it turned. A horn lay beneath the frozen sea. We saw it through clear black ice as the frost thinned in a circle, not a blowing horn of cattle, but a war horn bound in bronze, long as a mast, carved with runes that hurt to look at even without sight. Around it, chains ran down into darkness. One chain had snapped. Another strained. A third trembled with each unseen step. Odin's ravens lifted from the mast. Choose your next gifts carefully, Eirik Halvorsen, the pale-eyed one said. The gods have begun choosing enemies. They flew north into the snow. The horn under the ice sounded again. The ship shook. The ice cracked beneath us in a widening ring. Beyond it, giant footprints crossed the frozen sea toward the south, toward living coasts, toward every poor shore and rented field I had ever known. Rold was ended. We had escaped his island. We had a ship, provisions, rescued survivors, and breath in our bodies. And the world had just announced that survival was only the first door.